right. So we are live, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I'm with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms and homes around the world. So we're getting near the end of our summer programs. I know a lot of you guys are getting ready to enjoy a couple months of rest and relaxation after all this chaos the last few months. So we really appreciate you joining us as we continue our series with Ripleys Aquarium of Canada. So in the heart of downtown Toronto, they might be closed to the public right now, but animal care and education continues. So we have done a bevy of programs with them, everything from seahorses to sharks to turtles and more. Those are all on our YouTube channel, and I encourage you to check them out. But today we're going to go to one of my personal favorite tanks at the Rainbow Reef to see some of the amazing tropical fish that call corals home, learn a little bit about what coral reefs are all about, some of the amazing fish, and then dive in with questions both from our live groups and from you guys on YouTube as well. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Katie, and take us away.
Thanks, Jesse. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. And we're so happy to be able to bring you an inside look at the aquarium while we are closed to the public. So as Jesse mentioned, today we're joining you from Rainbow Reef, which is our 4th largest exhibit, but actually the very most biodiversity of any of the exhibits here at the aquarium. And a special treat for you guys today, not only do we have all these amazing fish, we've also got an amazing human. We've got Steve, our scuba diver, who's going to be in feeding all our fish some delicious treats. So if you can't see him, it's because he's very, very popular with that delicious container of krill in his hands. And they're just going to mob him as he starts feeding them. And we'll get a chance to look at them. So let me tell you a little bit more about this exhibit. As I mentioned, it is the 4th largest in the aquarium. It has about 1,000 different animals in it. So 1,000 fish representing approximately 100 species. I'll let you know right now, if you ask me what they all are, I can't tell you. There's too many to keep track of, but they're beautiful. And I will definitely tell you about some of them at the end. This exhibit is mimicking an Indo-Pacific coral reef habitat. And so Lucky Steve is in there. It is a balmy 24 degrees Celsius, really lovely exhibit to dive in, especially compared to some of our colder ones, which more on the 10 degrees Celsius range. So nice and warm for him today and for all of our fish. So what is Steve feeding? He's feeding krill. See if we can get in close and see. I know it's just a bevy of colors and activity there on your screen, but yeah, so krill, little tiny creatures. So these fish are mostly omnivorous, so they eat both plants and animals. So today they get krill. Some days they might get a head of lettuce or some other leafy greens. They get some fish pellets, so similar to what you might feed a fish tank at home. Or brine shrimp is another one of their favorites. So they get a variety of different food substances throughout the day and throughout the week. And although the fish are definitely the highlight of this exhibit with all their beautiful colors, the name Rainbow Reef is actually because of the coral. So I'm going to ask a question. I want you to think about what you think, and then we'll come back and answer that question in a moment. So is this coral real or fake, artificial? So I'll give you a little bit of a look here. There's a look at some of the coral. Is it real or fake? So if you don't know about coral, it is in fact an animal. So people get confused. Is it a plant? Is it an animal? It's a rock. Technically, it's a little bit of all three. The coral itself is an animal called a polyp, which is related to the jellyfish. So if you can picture a jellyfish in your mind, shrink it down, turn it upside down. That's essentially what a coral polyp looks like, or kind of like an anemone. It has stinging cells like an anemone does. It's in that same family of animals. The polyps are building calcium carbonate skeleton, which is what gives all those cool shapes. And the calcium carbonate skeleton itself has no color. So it's whitish, and the polyps build that by excreting calcium carbonate over time. It does grow very, very slowly, anywhere from just a few millimeters up to 10 centimeters a year. So there's another clue as to whether our coral is real or fake. It grows very slowly. So if the coral calcium carbonate skeleton itself is white, how come the coral is so colorful. And the polyps themselves are kind of colorless. So they're not providing all this beautiful color. The color itself is coming from an algae. So the algae that lives in coral is called zooxanthellae. It is has a symbiotic relationship with the coral polyp. And so the algae is photosynthesizing and providing food for the polyp, and the polyp is providing a home for the algae. And it is those algae, the zooxanthellae, that give coral all of its beautiful colors. So the other thing to know about that calcium carbonate skeleton is that it is very fragile. So that's another clue. Is this coral real or fake if coral is fragile? So let's see if we can get Steve to demonstrate for us whether our coral is real or fake. And you can think about to yourself, do you have your answer ready, real or fake? So it's slow growing, it's fragile. Would we have a big exhibit like this full of coral? This amount of coral probably would have taken a few hundred years to grow. And we would never do this with real coral. It would break off. So for practical purposes and for ease of care, our coral is all artificial. It's made out of rubber and concrete and paint, and they did an amazing job to make it look just like real coral. It does fool a lot of people, but the advantage for us in having artificial coral is one, when Steve's in there, he doesn't have to worry about if he bangs into it with his scuba tanks or if he kicks it by accident, it's not going to break. Obviously, we wouldn't want to do that with real coral. That would be terrible for it, especially if it was a piece that took a long time to grow. It means we can get in there and scrub it. And also when the aquarium opened, we wouldn't have wanted to harvest this amount of coral from the wild. It would be very environmentally destructive to remove this amount of coral. And as I said, it would take a few hundred years probably for this amount of coral to grow. And we just didn't have that kind of time. We didn't know 200 years ago that there was going to be an aquarium at the base of the CN Tower. So we weren't able to get a head start on growing coral for this habitat. That's true of all the exhibits here at the aquarium with the exception of one. So we do have one exhibit with live coral. It's called Living Coral, ironically, and you can find that in the gallery. And if you want to learn more about it or see it, if you go on our Facebook page, we did a live video from that Living Coral exhibit a few weeks ago. So you could scroll back and find that if you wanted to check that out. So that's a little bit about our coral. What about coral reefs in the wild? So coral reefs are a really important habitat for fish and other animals, but they only take up less than 1% of the ocean. So less than 1% of the ocean has coral reefs in it, but 25% or 1/4 of all marine life will spend some or part or all of its life in a coral reef. That's an amazing amount for such a tiny amount of space. That is approximately 4,000 different kinds of fish, 800 species of coral, and a plethora of other animals as well, like sea turtles, all kinds of invertebrates. It's an amazing, diverse habitat. Coral reefs are typically found in shallow water. The algae needs to be close to the surface for sunlight so it can photosynthesize. So the water tends to be shallow, typically warm water. So most of coral reefs are located closer to the equator, and the Indo-Pacific has the greatest amount of coral reef habitat of any region of the world. Coral reefs are important for people as well as for animals. So there is a huge amount of the world's population that lives in areas with coral reefs that rely on them for different purposes. So it could be for food, for fisheries. It could be for shoreline protection. So coral reefs typically act as a barrier between the ocean and the shoreline and would help with mitigating any large waves from storms or storm damage from stuff blowing in off the ocean. And of course, tourism and recreation is a huge industry. Maybe not right now. We're not able to go down to the Caribbean or to the Indo-Pacific to visit these coral reefs ourselves. So we'll have to satisfy ourselves with our little aquarium friends here. But worldwide tourism from diving, snorkeling, boating, beaches, all of that stuff is a huge industry for a lot of different areas of the world. And of course, for science, there's a lot happening in coral reefs as well. And there's some thought that there could be a lot of potential future medicines and stuff that could be found from researching coral reef animals and habitats. Those are things that we don't even know about yet. The most famous coral reef that you're probably aware of is the Great Barrier Reef, which is located in Australia, or off the coast of Australia. It's an amazing 2,600 kilometers long, and they estimate that the Great Barrier Reef is probably about 2 million years old, which is a pretty outstanding amount of time for a coral reef to grow. But of course, like all coral reefs, the Great Barrier Reef is in a lot of trouble from climate change. Climate change is something that we talk about here a lot at the aquarium. It's affecting a lot of our animals in different ways. Coral reefs in particular are being affected by increasing ocean temperatures. So by putting additional carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the global temperature is rising, which I'm sure you've heard about. You might have heard about it called global warming. But that climate change or increasing ocean temperatures has a huge effect on corals, and it's not a good effect. So just by raising ocean temperatures by 1 or 2 Celsius over a sustained period of time of a few weeks can cause the coral polyps to spit out that algae that gives them all that beautiful color. And if the algae aren't taken back up by the polyps within a few days, the polyps will start to die. Obviously, we said that the algae is creating food for the polyp, and without that food source, the coral will begin to die off. And that's an effect called coral bleaching. So if you remember, I showed you this piece of coral that I had here. It is whitish and it's all bleached out, and that's how coral would look when it loses its colorful algae. So that's why it's called coral bleaching. The other aspect of climate change which is affecting coral is by changing the amount of carbon dioxide being absorbed by the ocean. It's affecting creatures like coral and their ability to build their calcium carbonate skeletons. And all shelled creatures are also experiencing this effect. Ocean acidification is changing the pH of the ocean water, and it just makes it harder for them to build those shells. And that's a huge problem, especially lower down on the food chain where there's a lot of teeny tiny zooplankton that create shells that are food for other creatures. So what can you do? As per usual, there's lots of things that you can help with climate change. Reducing your carbon footprint is really the overarching message. And there's lots of small changes that you can make that add up to a big change. So reducing the amount of plastic that you use, so making sure that you're using a reusable water bottle, not using disposable straws and cutlery and plastic bags as much as possible. Driving less, so walking or using your bike. Eating less meat also helps with climate change. So eating lower on the food chain, having a plant-based diet will really help with climate change as well. And even simple things like if you're done using your phone charger or you're not using your laptop, to make sure that you unplug it from the wall. All those devices are still drawing a tiny bit of electricity when they're plugged in, even when your phone is not attached, and that can help as well. All right, so I bet you're wondering about all of these amazing fish that you're seeing. So we're gonna try and pick out a few to tell you about. So let's start with our famous friend, this lovely blue lady. So I'm sure you all are all aware that she starred in her own movie. You might know her as Dory. We know her as the palate surgeonfish. So there's some clues to some interesting things about the palate surgeonfish that come from that name. So palette, so if you think of an artist's palette, so the thing that an artist would hold to have their paint on, the blue and black markings on her body reminded whoever decided to call her a palate surgeonfish of an artist's palette. The surgeonfish part comes because near her tail, she actually has a super sharp spine that's said to be as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. So super sharp. That's her defense. And I can confirm that we have had some of our aquarium biologists have come in contact with said barb and have felt the consequences. So that is a true fact. Who else can we find to tell you about? Let's go with these ladies here. So these are the orbicular bat fish. They tend to swim in a school. They're one of the larger fish in this exhibit. They're probably not Steve's favorite if we were to ask him. And that's because they tend to pull his hair. Everyone always asks about whether our divers are afraid of the sharks. And actually, the sharks are no problem at all. The sharks are very docile, but these bat fish are the ones that tend to be the terrors of this exhibit. There are no sharks in here, but the bat fish are the ones that are gonna pull his hair and nip his fingers and that kind of thing. They're not the nicest of the fish in here. Who else? Oh, I see a Picasso triggerfish right here. So Picasso, like the artist, has some beautiful colors on it. Oh, swam into the crowd. Oh, right there. Again. And there's another type of triggerfish in here that I really like. Oh, there, Steve's pointing out the Picasso triggerfish for you. Right here, giving him his lunch. Now, where's that clown trigger gone? Of course, they disappear right at the time when you want to talk about them. Oh, here he is right here. Excellent. One of my personal favorites because his belly looks like a soccer ball. So it's easy to describe when you're trying to pick him out for people. Show him in off. Now he gets his little personal meal. We'll try and get him to hold still. Where'd he go? So cool thing about triggerfish is they have 3 spines on their back, and they can back up into little crevices and stuff, and they can actually make that spine rigid and hold themselves in that little space. So they can sort of pull it like a trigger so it locks them in. Who else? Who else? Some unicorn fish maybe? Let's see if I can find a good unicorn fish to show you. So there's a clue. You guys look on the screen, tell me if you, or see if you can find a unicorn fish. They're pretty distinctive looking. There's one, but it's not gonna give you the clue that it's a unicorn.
Keeping my eyes
here's
peeled.
a good, here's a good example of a unicorn fish.
Yeah.
In the back there. So males tend to have that projection. It's called a rostral horn. We're not entirely sure what the purpose is, so we assume that means it is probably for sexual selection in that females prefer it. So the males tend to have more developed nasal rostrums. Here's another. This guy, come forward and show off for you. Oh, these other guys are gonna get in the way. We're finding that the fish are very curious whenever we're down here because they're kind of getting used to not seeing people after 3 months of us not having guests in our building. All right, we've got another famous friend over here. See if you can spot some orange friends in the back there. So those are a species of clownfish called tomato clownfish. There are actually 30 different kinds of clownfish altogether, not just the ones that we're most familiar with from that movie. Those ones are anemone clownfish. You could also call them all anemone fish because they have that very cool relationship with anemones, which would normally sting, but clownfish have a bit of a mucus on them that protects them from that stinging. They build that up over time. And a really cool thing about clownfish is that there is only ever one female. They live in a group, and the top fish in that group is the female. Everyone else in that group is a male, and only the top male gets to mate with that female. And then when something happens to her, that top male turns into a female, and then the next male gets to mate with that new female. So it's called sequential hermaphroditism. There's your science words for today, sequential hermaphroditism. And then they're going to be hard to see on the screen, but just over this spiky piece of coral, if you see two little fish with a black stripe around their middle, they're one of our favorites because they're called the Pajama Cardinal fish. And it looks like they're wearing pajama bottoms. Like the black stripe is the waistband. And then they kind of got like they're wearing polka dot pants on the bottom that look kind of like pajama pants. And then of course there's like another 90 some species in here. So all kinds of different things to choose from, beautiful colors. They're tricky. Oh, here Steve's pointing out the Pajama Cardinal fish for you. There we go. Yeah, some of them look very similar. Some look at the males and females look different. Some look one way when they're juveniles, and then they mature into their adult coloration and they change. So it keeps us on our toes trying to keep track of what they all are. Okay, Jesse, I think I'm ready for some questions.
Fantastic. Well, I want to stress for everyone at home how difficult it is to try and find the fish that you want in these sessions. So way to go, Katie. That was awesome. All right, we've got live groups from Ontario, Alberta, Newfoundland, across Mexico, and more. So a huge thank you to all you guys for being live on screen with us. I will be taking some questions from YouTube as well. So if you haven't shared any questions yet you'd like to, please go ahead. But first, I'm going to go to Mr. Hill. If you want to kick us off with a question from your class or on behalf of your class, go for it.
All right, thanks, Jesse. Hi, Katie. My class, grade 5, 6, they want to know how you keep that aquarium clean. The schedule of cleaning the glass and all the coral.
Nice.
Good question. And forgive our mess, it is definitely not as clean as it normally is, just because we're working with reduced staff right now. So we're not getting in as much scrubbing as we would like. Typically, every time the divers go in, they'll take a scrub brush with them and do a small section of coral. The acrylic also just gets, oh, here, Steve's gonna polish some up for you right in front of us. So we'll do the acrylic from the inside, probably a couple times a week, just give it a quick wipe down. And of course, on the outside is where all the fingerprints go. So it actually probably needs to be cleaned more frequently on the outside than on the inside. Of course, we also have lots of filters running 24/7 here. So most of these large exhibits undergo the equivalent of a full water change every hour. So we're scooping out as much of that fish waste and bits of food that they're not eating is pretty much continuously being removed, and clean, crystal clean, perfect water is going back in. So that's important for the animal's health as well as for the appearance of the exhibit. And then, yeah, with a scrub brush, they'll go in and do that coral as much as they can. I mean, it could always use more, and they just try and stay on top of it the best they can.
Fantastic. And the Oscar goes to Steve for playing along so well. That's awesome. A couple notes before we keep going on. Ms. Picasso, there's a whole bunch of your students, so I'm going to come to you directly in a second, Ms. Picasso. If your students have a question, just let me know in the chat bar. Also, we've got 150 people from across Canada, the US, and Mexico joining us live, Connecticut, Rhode Island, all across the states, BC, and more. So a huge welcome to all you guys as well. A question on behalf of two of our groups, so that they don't have to ask it. The name of the soccer ball belly fish. People want to know what that is again, if you could share it.
Yeah, that's an easy one. That's the clown triggerfish.
Perfect.
Where did he go? He was here and he's decided to go off and explore. If he comes by again, I'll try and get a good shot of him.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to go to Ms. LaCastro for a question now. So if you want one, come on up on behalf of your class, and I'll keep doing the rounds of everyone who's live with us.
Hi, I have a question about the reefs in the ocean. And you mentioned 25% of the animals in the ocean at some time are in contact with the reefs. What kinds of things are they using them for? Like, what do they rely on them for?
Nice.
Good question. So definitely in nursery habitat. So a lot of animals would start out their life in a coral reef where that is a little more sheltered and protected. And then as they mature, they might move off into more of the open ocean environment. A huge percentage are using them as their habitat for their entire life. Most of these fish would spend their entire life in a coral reef. Something like a shark or maybe a stingray would probably come closer to a coral reef when they're looking for food. So they would use it as a food source. There's even a kind of fish that eats the coral polyp. So that's called a parrot fish. And we actually don't have any here because it's not real coral, and they would be very destructive to our decor. And also if we had real coral, they would eat that as well. But anywhere where you go where there's a white sand beach, that's coral that's been digested by fish and pooped back out. So when you're lying on your beautiful white sand beach, you're actually lying in pre-digested coral.
Fantastic. And isn't that a romantic thought, Katie? Thank you. Let me go to Ms. Picasso joining us in Yucatan, Merida in Mexico. So nice to have a Mexican classroom in. So Ms. Picasso, just unmute your mic and you are good to go.
Okay, ask the question. Closer.
What's the name of the biggest fish?
In the whole aquarium or just in the one tank?
In that tank or
In that tank.
In this tank, I would say the biggest one are these orbicular bat fish. They're pretty substantial. I'd say they're probably like dinner plate sized would be my analogy. Whereas you can see a lot of compared to a lot of the other ones that are swimming around Steve's, the other ones are a lot smaller. The bat fish are definitely the biggest.
Nice, great question, guys. All right, Jay on YouTube, he's 4. He wants to know, how long can Steve stay in that tank? I don't know if that's excitement or worry, but either way.
This one, Steve could stay in for quite a while. He's got a good amount of air in his tank, and it's not cold, so he's not getting uncomfortable. So really, until his fingers go pruny, probably is about the length of time he might spend in here. We don't spend oh, he's given us a shot of so he's got his air tank here on his back. So until that runs out, we don't ever usually stay in our exhibits that long. We've got lots of things to do, lots of animals to care for, so they tend to get in, do their thing, and get out. Our dive shows are usually about 15 minutes when we're open to the public, and then they would spend another few minutes in their cleaning. So probably like maybe a half hour to 45 minutes is kind of our typical length of time that our teams stay underwater. What a ham.
Steve,
what a ham Steve
is.
is.
Seriously like a ham, but like a hero too. Like gold star to Steve, man. So Caitlin, you can pass that on upstairs, but Steve rocks. That's so much fun.
Can you tell he's missing people?
Yeah. Friends coming soon, stage 2. Caleb in Port Bass, Newfoundland. Man, if you want to ask a question, come on up. Caleb's been joining us like so many online, his first time on camera. So nice to have you in, Caleb. Go for it, man.
Yeah, how big can the unicorn fish get?
Yeah.
Like as in how tall?
How long?
Or
Yeah.
how long?
Simple question.
That's a good question. I don't have that information in my head. They are definitely on the larger size of some of the fish in here. I don't imagine they'll get a lot bigger, but they definitely have. I've noticed that they have grown over the 7 years, almost 7 years that we've been open. My fact checker is just trying to see if she can find an answer for us, but I would guess 30 centimeters. Oh no, I'm wrong. Twice that. They could get as big as 60 centimeters apparently.
Jeez. That's like so 2/3 of a meter, 2 feet they can get. So this is a big fish. That's fantastic. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. All right, Miss Finot's class, or Miss Finot, if you want to share a question on behalf of your class, just demute your mic and you're good to go.
Hi guys. First of all, Steve, we like your tank gymnastics. That's awesome. And the question we have is, how long is the lifespan of most of these fish, and do they always get along?
Good question. So lifespan will vary. Typically, tropical fish don't live an overly long time. They would have probably, I think the clownfish was sort of like 2 to 5 years was about the amount. I know they don't all necessarily get along. They definitely chase each other. They definitely tend to get a bit cliquey at times. Like those batfish tend to always swim together in a school. We used to joke that they were kind of like the mean girls. They wouldn't let any of the other fish swim with them. They would just hang out in their own little pack of batfish. But we do try and make really informed decisions about what kind of animals we would introduce. Obviously, we want to pick animals that would live together in the wild, that would inhabit this type of space and that will, for the most part, get along. We don't want to purposely introduce things that are going to feel stressed or be faced with aggression from other kinds of animals. But that's usually based on research and our sort of the resources that we can tap into from others using aquariums that may have had things like that in animals like that in the past, and what kind of success they've had with them.
Nice. It's a question we've been getting a lot on YouTube as well, so thanks for asking, Miss Fit. That's fantastic. A question from Miss Ray's class, and welcome back in, guys. You guys are in so many of these programs. How many of these fish were introduced into the tank when Ripley's first opened? And I guess the idea behind this is, have they just bred like mad and filled the tank, or were there always this many, or do you know, Katie?
Unfortunately, tropical fish like this don't breed well in human care. There's so many nuanced environmental factors that we're still learning about. There is definitely breeding programs at various aquariums and facilities to try and breed more. I believe somewhere in the States is successfully breeding the palate surgeon fish now, the dories. So most of these would have been caught, wild caught, or on our behalf, maybe from a collector or from our own team. Unfortunately, with a big exhibit like this too, sometimes if they're breeding and they lay eggs, we just might not notice, depending on how tiny the eggs are and whether they hide them or whether they get swept away by those filtration systems. The population itself is relatively stable. Obviously, over 7 years, we do experience some loss. Some will inevitably get sick or have a conflict with another fish and have an injury. And so some might be euthanized, or but not many. And then we obviously we're maintaining our population as well. So we're looking to obtain fish from maybe from other aquariums or from breeders where we can to keep the population around that 1,000 fish mark, roughly.
Nice. Katie, I think you answered like 17 different questions that have been pouring in on YouTube in that one answer. So way to go. All right. Do you have time actually for another round of questions with our live groups?
Yeah, I'm happy to hang around for a bit longer. Steve seems happy to hang out here.
He's very happy to hang out here. Steve, this is the definition of too much fun. A quick question from YouTube. A grade 2 question I wanted to ask: what's the tank? What's the water temperature in this tank for the fish?
A balmy 24 Celsius. So like you were on vacation somewhere down south, swimming in nice, warm, beautiful, salty water.
Yeah, nice. Lucky them. All right, I'm going to go to Mr. Hill class first. Mr. Hill, do you want to ask a second question? Go for it.
Thanks. Hi, Katie. Do these fish have personalities, and can you play with them?
Well, good question. Some of them definitely do. Some are more interested in people than others. Some are more curious than others. It's tricky, right? Because you get into this whole anthropomorphism thing where you're assigning human traits to animals, which we try and be really careful about. But for example, like our green sea turtle Spot, which you can go back and watch one of our previous explore sessions, she has had some fairly serious illnesses in her past, and so has had a lot of interaction with people. So she's very people oriented and is very friendly and curious whenever there is a human that appears near the edge of her exhibit or in her exhibit with her. She's very attention seeking, I guess. And then others, of course, probably want nothing to do with us in this exhibit.
Nice. Great questions, guys, by the way. This has been fantastic. I'm going to go to Ms. LaCastro again for a second question. Come on up on behalf of your class in Guelph and go for it.
Sure. I have a question about the colors, and the question is, why are the fish different colors?
Oh, good question. So this is an unusual ecosystem in that it is brightly colored. Most animals are interested in camouflage, and we think of sort of like muted grays and greens and browns and stuff. But because the coral itself is so brightly colored, because it's the photosynthetic algae providing it, then the fish are also able to be very brightly colored. The coloration is important for communication primarily, so communicating with their own species. So Obviously, it's so diverse. There's so many different kinds of animals here. They need to be able to find each other for reproductive purposes. And then some of it would be for the purposes of warning coloration. Sorry, Steve's telling in a bat fish to back off, not to pull his hair, but it's hovering over his head. It's very distracting. So some of them, like something like the pallet surgeonfish that I mentioned that has that sharp spine, some of it might be warning coloration. So like a snake or a bee or a wasp would have warning coloration to say, I sting or I'm venomous. Some of the fish would use that kind of coloration as well. And actually the bright colors are their camouflage in such a brightly colored habitat.
Fantastic. Thanks, Katie. Great question. I like all the other teachers nodding their heads for these questions. It's awesome. Let me go to Ms. Picasso again. If you have a second question for us on behalf of your class, come on up and go for it.
Hi. Okay. Well, this is like, I don't know if it really does this or happens with tropical fishes. We live in Merida, Yucatan. We're very close to the beach. We're about half away. And it's like something I really don't like, that fishes like come up to you and like give you kisses, or that's like the expression we say down here. Do they, the tropical fish, do they do the same things? Do they like get close to you and like kiss you on the legs or something?
I'm sure they do. They're definitely in his hair. They for sure learn to associate people with food, because when we go in, we always bring food for them. So fingers are definitely susceptible to nips as well. Some of our dive team actually wear gloves when they're in here. And especially with the stingrays as well, you have to be careful when you're hand feeding them, because if your finger is mistaken for food, it doesn't feel very nice. They don't mean to bite, the stingrays, but if they're eagerly gulping down their lunch and your finger gets in the way, too bad for you. It's like slamming it in a drawer. So.
No one wants that. We've never had a fish kiss question before, so thanks, Ms. Picasso. That is the first in the history of the program. Let me go to Caleb. If you have another question for us, man, you should just demute your mic and you'll be good to go. Okay, perfect. Go for it.
Okay.
Oh,
What is the oldest fish in the tank?
Oh, the oldest fish. I'm gonna
is that
go
what
back
happened? Wait, what happened?
All good, Caleb. No worries. Yep.
Oh, we heard you. Yep. So probably these ones, I would say, I know they've been here since before we opened, which was October 2013. So I would say they're probably on the older end. Unfortunately, we don't really know how old any of the fish were before they came here, especially since they were likely wild caught. We don't have any real way of aging them until I think there is a way you can do something with their ear bone once they have died. You can age them that way, but really it's just guesses at this point. But here's that Picasso triggerfish again.
My favorite fish in the tank. Just hamming it up. It's pulling a Steve,
Jesse,
we'll call it.
I'll put you on the spot, Jesse. Do you know what its Hawaiian equivalent is called?
Yeah. No, there's like 87 letters or something, and there's 20 P's or something. Papa, Hana, Schnaga, whatever. Something like that. You can
something
tell
like that, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Let me go to our last live group is Miss Finot's class. So if you have another question for us, come on up. And here we go.
We actually don't have any further questions. That was just a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So Katie, then, in that being the case, is there a last message you want to share with us about how kids can learn more about what's going on in the aquarium, how they can get involved, learn more about all the cool fish you guys have?
Yeah, for sure. So if you're enjoying this exhibit, you can actually go on our website anytime, and there's a live camera running. So if you just want to come back and check it out later and just watch the fish without having to listen to me talk, you can do that anytime. And then also on our website are tons of resources for activities and crafts you can do. Definitely go back and check out some of the previous Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants that we've done. It's been like 1 or 2 a week for the last couple of months. So there's tons of good content there. Shark feeding, jellyfish, seahorses, all kinds of stuff to check out. And our social media pages is where we'll post any sort of new stuff that's coming up. So keep an eye on Facebook and Instagram for new stuff coming up over the next couple of weeks.
Fantastic. So what I'm going to do, Katie, is I'm going to pass that along in the chat bar too, so people can check out all those things and to all our live groups. Before we wrap up, do you want to relay via Caitlin something to Steve? But Steve's, I mean, you know, not that he has anything else, new tricks in his belt, but if there's anything else he'd like to do before we go.
Is there anything you're requesting?
I don't know. Steve, I don't know, man. Let's see. Steve, just big bye from Steve. That's okay.
He's
That's
already
perfect.
done bubbles and handstands and
yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Crazy.
Putting him on the spot. No,
That's
no
funny.
tricks, he says. He's done.
No more tricks. Oh, who knows? Okay, next time we'll check in with Steve. Katie, thank you so much. This has been a really fantastic presentation. We really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much, Jesse. We love doing these with you guys.
Awesome. You know what we're going to do? I forgot to do. If everyone can demute their microphones, Miss Picasso students, Miss Finot's class, Caleb, all you guys, just demute your microphones. Join me in saying a huge thank you to Katie and the Ripley's Aquarium team. You guys should all be good to go. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
All right, bye
Thank you,
everyone. We'll see you all
guys.
soon.